Good afternoon, everybody. My name's James. I'll be stepping off camera shortly. I just thought I'd put a face to the name. Welcome to Upstairs, and welcome to today's panel session, where we have 5 very special guests joining us here from across the region of the central west of New South Wales. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wiradjuri people, traditional custodians of the land on which we gather here today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, either in person or online with us on the broadcast. My name is James Lloyd, as I mentioned, and I'm today's facilitator. And I would like to welcome everybody online and in person to the Upstairs Startup Hub here in Bathurst, central west New South Wales, just across the Blue Mountains. Upstairs is a co-working space founded by some of the pillars in our community here, those being Bathurst Regional Council, Reliance Bank, or Unity Bank for anybody further abroad, the New South Wales Department of Premier and Cabinet, and Charles Sturt University. Special thanks to Maxime and the team at SparkFest, of course, for once again, despite all odds and all challenges posed because of the pandemic, organising another great series of events. So thank you to the SparkFest team. It's been amazing to be part of it and to continue to see this series of events continue to grow, especially out here in the region, having access to this sort of providing access to the metro areas with our range of expertise, as well as getting to tune in to see what the rest of the country is doing. So it's fantastic. Also, special thanks to Abby for organising the event today, and Jerida. If anybody's come into the space, you'll know that it's these two forces driving a lot of the initiative. So thank you to you both for putting it all together. Finally, and most importantly, big thanks to everybody joining us at the table. We have a great range and breadth of experience joining us here with a variety of backgrounds in industry. Coming from regional centres presents a number of different challenges, but it also presents a number of different opportunities, which we'll be exploring today. So to kick it off, we have Dr. Alice Monroe joining us. If you want to give a little wave to the camera there.
Hey, everybody.
Dr. Monroe is the Director of Research with Western New South Wales Local Health District. In this newly established role, Dr. Monroe's focus aims to strengthen research capacity to improve the health of people living in 1/3 of New South Wales. Dr. Monroe was previously a postdoctoral research fellow based at the National Drug and Alcohol Research Centre at NSW and completed a PhD here, which evaluated community-led drug and alcohol programs in communities in Western New South Wales, and a remote Aboriginal residential rehabilitation service, amongst other things. So welcome, Dr. Monroe.
Thanks.
Sam Harmer, on Dr. Monroe's left, is the CEO of Regional Development Australia, Central West. Sam's knowledge and expertise in the portfolio of regional development is only matched by his enthusiasm and drive to deliver economic development opportunities in conjunction with sustainable, connected and a united Central West. So I think I speak for everybody here that to have someone like yourself leading that is an absolute asset to the region. So thanks for joining us. Craig Murphy, stage right, is a passionate IT professional who has been working in the industry for over 25 years. Recently made one of the best decisions he ever did. My words, possibly his. When moving with his family to Orange to look for new opportunities in the Central West. Prior to the move, he was a developer, advocate and leading the Global Entrepreneur Program at IBM Australia. And during his time here, Craig worked closely with several startups from idea to proof of concept, transitioning these into scale-ups and going on to be successful companies. So welcome, Craig. Carolyn James, just to the left of Craig, is the leader of the GATE project, which is the global agtech ecosystem within the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, which launched in Orange in March of 2018. Carolyn has over 20 years' experience in strategic and policy advice to state and local government, with management roles in the New South Wales Cabinet Office, the New South Wales and Northern Territory Parliaments, and the City of Sydney Council. The GATE Centre is a specialist hub for entrepreneurs and research scientists specialising in agtech and innovation in primary industries. So thanks for joining us, Carolyn. Finally, in the middle here, we have Ashley Bland, member and entrepreneur here at Upstairs Startup Hub. Ash's best work days are spent inspiring and assisting others to improve their environmental impact. Ash looks for win-win scenarios that deliver benefits to people, the planet, and the local economy. Operating predominantly in the energy space at present, he works across a number of businesses, leading innovative solutions for delivering training, resources, and environmental solutions for organisations. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. I'll stop talking and let the panellists have a go. And my first question, which I might get Dr. Monroe to lead off with, is if you could provide us with 3 quick tips or a piece of wisdom that businesses may be able to implement to help them innovate.
Thanks, James. Well, it's tricky to follow such an esteemed panel with kicking off some ideas, but we're new in the pitch it space in health. So obviously our region is a third of New South Wales, and we're a bit of a slow-moving beast in terms of so much bureaucracy to get innovation happening. So this is why it's really exciting for us to be in our second year of our Pitch It program and to be linked up with this sort of group to get us moving in the right space. But from us, just to kick the conversation off, the couple of tips are, in the health game, clinicians are passionate. They know they're experts in their field. They certainly don't think that their ideas are often powerful, but they are. And so you hear the stories and you hear that genuineness and the real idea behind it. So keeping it simple would be the really big tip that I would give, because often the idea in itself is just so valuable because it can really help the outcomes of people living in our region health-wise. And another quick tip is in health, as with all of our industries, there's lots of jargon and lots of health. It's a whole nother language in terms of medical diagnoses and equipment and other things like that. So if you can communicate your idea to someone outside of your industry and that can resonate and sink in, then I think that's a really good start to moving it along. And just even that process of writing your idea down, often clinicians will talk about it a lot but never move that next step. So writing it down, talking about it, and that can help mobilise some momentum to get it happening.
For sure. I think that's a really good point. And I saw Craig nodding his head over here as far as the jargon and being able to distill your idea down nice and clearly for your grandmother to understand it. Is,
general community members.
Yeah. You mentioned the Pitch It event. I don't know if you want to maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I can give you a bit of a spiel on that. So it's our second year. We are largely relying on philanthropic and charitable donations and sponsorship from industry partners and health organisations, academics in the region. So last year we had $60,000 to kickstart our Pitch It event, and every cent went to clinicians' ideas. So there was 9 that was funded, and some really great ones that have come from that around virtual reality technology, recycling single-use medical instruments that are usually just incinerated. So huge environmental impacts. This year we've now evolved it. We've got 80,000. So hopefully, next year will be 100, 200,000. And we've got a green category now because we obviously heard from clinicians there were lots of environmentally focused ideas in health, because the health footprint is really quite significant for the region. So yeah, Pitch It's eventually hopefully going to be something in the health landscape out here that's not just a local health district event, that hopefully other health organisations might be able to tap into if we get enough funding. So it's a really stage of our development.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Good segue too. Yeah. I'll throw to Ash to give his 3 quick tips, being somewhat green-oriented yourself.
Yeah, sure. Love the planet. In all seriousness, one of the great things about the paradigm we're living in now, I've spent a lot of my early career trying to convince people that there was value in preserving the natural environments. Like, you really should do this. Why? Well, because it's the right thing to do. And people go, where's it on my P&L? And nowadays, like, it's always been the case. We've just avoided the externalities of trashing the environment, right? But now that it's actually here, there's this beautiful alignment with doing the right thing and making money out of it. And I think, the emergence of a whole heap of particularly younger people doing startups that have profit for purpose, and social ventures, and, it's like a younger generation has looked at what we've done and gone, well, that looks fundamentally shallow. How about we make some money and do good in the world along the way, you know? So I encourage you to find that purpose within yourself, you know, find something that you truly believe you want to do. And of course, I like to see us all focus the next decade or so on being around here for longer. But, you know, one of the other tips I would also say is get yourself positioned to actually be successful. And that might mean if you're in an organisation, you know, maybe get yourself in a position that people can hear you. So don't be the mouthy, loud one that everyone starts to ignore. Like, and in a private kind of sense, get yourself financially secure, get your family on board, you know, get yourself in a position where you are able to hang on for the white knuckle ride that is getting any particular idea off the shelf. And then the third thing I would say is listen to people you don't like or that you disagree with, you know, because the people in your way are actually the most important people to you. And you know, if you can, my grandfather once put it beautifully. He said, Ash, he said, there'll be an apple on the table and someone will come up to you and say, that's a green apple. You might look at it and go, oh, it is a green apple. And he said, and someone else will come along and say, see that apple there, Ash? That's a red apple. And you might go, well, actually, it's a green apple with red flecks, or it's red. He said, but unless you listen to those people, you might never have thought to look for the red or the green. And I think it's really valuable. And I look back at where I've had wins in my life, and very often it's been tough love, things I haven't wanted to hear from people I didn't agree with. That later I've gone, you know what, I learned a lot out of that. So don't be afraid of people who knock your idea. You know, in fact, we were talking about that earlier, weren't you? The barriers are actually what you've got to cross.
Yeah, I heard an expression once which was sometimes your best idea can be your most dangerous, because you know, if you're dead set on that, it can collapse everything else around you. So yeah, good insight. I might throw, naturally, this panel's just writing its own story. Carolyn, from apples to agriculture, if you want to give us some quick tips there.
Well, I can go through a couple of things, I suppose, quick tips for just entrepreneurs, just building on what was just said. Yeah, there is something I think that is different in the startup land from traditional small business land, which is this collegiate and mentoring process that happens in the startup sort of space and the entrepreneurial space that is really incredibly valuable because of exactly what you're saying about making sure that you listen to a sharpen and get your product to be better and fit for market. And to give you an example of what we do at the Gate, we actually have put that into practice. So the Gate is part of the Department of Primary Industries. We have 600 researchers in the state, and it's an enormous footprint. We're actually bigger than CSIRO in terms of agricultural research.
Wow.
But they're traditional professional academic researchers. We put them side by side working on projects with entrepreneurs. And we get this really great different lens about how to get your product or your research uptaken, which feeds back into what Alice's purpose is as well. We're looking at startups, not just being a traditional small business person with a tech product. We're looking at startups and disciplines of startups and applying them to academic research or clinical processes. So the startup philosophy works in so many different facets. So you may not even you may go to university, want to be a full-time researcher, and you never think to yourself, you actually could be a scientific entrepreneur. So when we talk startups now, we've really evolved to this kind of sophisticated space. What's interesting about that is when you put people from a traditional academic background and you ask them to think like a startup, you ask them to get their ideas challenged, you ask them to think about the customer base, you get these two clashing paradigms about the degree of evidence that's valid, for example. The first thing all my researchers who come in will say, okay, we're going to run your research product through a startup lens. And we say to them, okay, we want you to call 10 people this afternoon and in 10 words or less, 10 minutes or less, pitch the product. They can't do it. Hardest exercise. They can nail an academic peer-to-peer conference pitch. Can they talk plain English to a third party? Can be a challenge. Some of them do it with ease, but it can be a challenge. The biggest issue is they say, but that's what calling 10 people isn't a statistically valid sample for evidence.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurs in the same course are going, what's your problem? This is just to get a feel and get that intuitive understanding of the market. So when you put those two really different headspaces together, which I think is the next generation of startup and entrepreneurialism we're finding, And that's where the public sector's come in, because we traditionally look after that area. We're getting some really interesting but positive results.
Yeah.
Stronger. Some of our entrepreneurs actually like it as well, because they're actually getting a little bit more rigour in some of the work they're doing. And in ag tech particularly, the market's become very competitive, and the next stage of your competitive advantage is to be able to have a sound validation of your product. So borrowing some of those academic standards to validate your product, doing your clinical trials, doing that is now the next step for a competitive edge for many ag tech companies. And I imagine in other startup sectors it's becoming more competitive. So it's a really interesting space to work in, and that's why government's sort of involved with this as well. But that's my one expanded tip.
Yeah, brilliant. I think it's important to note to our listeners online that, people often think of regional areas as not having that academic, talent pool available.
Absolutely. Just that professionalism in country areas, people I think don't see it. And it's not just through those academic and professional institutions like big government departments that are now based in the country. You've got a lot of people who are now doing sea changes, incredible people like Craig with his background, who are, you don't have to be a startup in a hub in the CBD of the capital city to be a great startup.
Absolutely. Plus with the decentralisation that the pandemic's brought on a bit quicker than we thought, there's more opportunity now than ever. We won't go to the tech yet because we'll probably finish with that, but I think we might go to Sam for his 3 quick tips. Sam.
Yeah, look, I think something that's come up so far, James, which is bang on, is access to mentors. And I think that's fantastic. And I think it's something that Ashley said is being willing to listen to others who have different perspectives, because you might just come out of that little gem that you can take to the bank later on, and it might just lead to a better end result. And something that's come up through a lot of the discussions that we've had, and I think it's been fast-tracked during this challenging period, is you've got to be willing to pivot and adapt. So it could be pivoting and adapting your idea, or pivoting and adapting your business, and change doesn't necessarily mean failure. A lot of businesses out there probably, when they're under pressure, they naturally kind of revert back into their shell and aren't willing to take a risk. But ultimately, to be successful, sometimes you need to take that risk to kind of either make that leap to the next iteration of your business, or to get through that challenging period. And I think there are a couple of really important tips. I'll leave the technology side of things to Craig.
I was going to talk about that.
No, I just think seizing and embracing technology has really been front of mind for a lot of businesses during the last few months, and I think it'll continue to be the case. But the last comment that I'll make, if I can, is in a regional setting, there's fantastic information and support that's there, especially in the Central West. We're at Upstairs in Bathurst today, where you're hearing from us, and it's letting startups and entrepreneurs know that you don't have to be in Macquarie Street, or you don't have to be on Pitt Street. You can set up shop in Cowra or Bathurst or Orange, and there's that support structure around you to help you navigate that journey. And it could be the tech meetup group in Orange, or whatever that support structure might be. But there are experts here in this region, and I think it's been, again, fast-tracked by COVID, but that collegiate approach, people want to help each other because they know if the region does better, or the entrepreneur cohort does better in our region, they will do better themselves. So I think they're just a couple of little tit-tats.
Well said.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So I'm supposed to talk about tech.
You don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it all.
Anyway, my actually, which has been covered in the talk, my usual 3 tips for startups is generally around listen more, connect more, and partner more. Which coming from the city, a lot of startups actually do a lot of that by default. Maybe not so much the listening, but definitely the other 2. We're coming out regionally. I noticed that particularly around connecting with places like the startup upstairs, the startup community, and not a lot of that goes on out here. A lot of really cool things happen here, but they're very siloed, or they're a little bit in the model, I can't talk too much about that because it's a secret. I probably have come across that more since moving, since the 8 months that I've lived out here. And there's a level of frustration in that a little bit. I kind of think you need to, if you connect more with other like-minded people, it's a really good way to thrash your idea out and to make it evolve. Particularly I have worked with a lot of PhD and academics previously, and they do get stuck in their little mindsets in their way, and they're always targeting that I've got to get my product to 100% before I can let it go to market and all those types of things. And what you really want to encourage them to do is, well, at 60%, let it go and see what happens, right? And if the industry wants it, and if customers want it, then the product will take off, and you can develop to your 100% over time. Matter of fact, by the time you get 100%, it might not be the product you actually originally started with. And I think that's a huge challenge. The other one which I kind of really harp on a fair bit is for startups is to find partnerships, right? And partnerships, that's a broad term. Partnerships could be from everything from working with spaces like here, like upstairs, working with organisations like RDA or the Gate, but also picking your technology partners as well. One of the things I find regionally, and I think this is a part of the challenge, is they probably don't know all these like cloud vendors offer, programs for startups. And I think because of that lack of partnership and that lack of engagement, it's also, don't get me wrong, it's on those vendors to be articulating out to regional areas what their offerings are. But also I think it's very important for those startups to find those partnerships and nurture them and keep them moving forward. Probably coming from my history of being a business partner in the technology space, I think it's, you get the customers get the best outcome when they're heavily engaged with their business partner, right? So where you're chopping and changing, dollar and diming your partner, things always fall apart for the customer at the end of the long run. But the partners and customers that kind of stick together, they're the ones that kind of get the best engagement. So they're usually my kind of like 3 tips, as I said, generally covered across the panel here. But they're the big ones. The last one's the one I think is the most important. You've got to. If there's no point building a billing system if there's already a billing system out in the market, or is already a guy across the room from you building a billing system. Collaborate with them. You probably find it's a really good opportunity to grow 2 businesses and not 1 business. So
for sure. And it's a good point too, you touched on it, that I might just comment on, is that I guess, regional New South Wales is everywhere north of Sydney, south of Sydney and west of Sydney. And we've seen a bit of support come through from the government, but I guess, from upstairs perspective, we'd certainly like to see a bit more support to help us do that. The market here is quite young as far as an entrepreneurial sense goes, so we're on that journey.
And on a technology front, we are in a really unique time now where you can really easily collaborate with someone who is in Broken Hill, and you might have people in Sydney or Brisbane or Melbourne, or where just don't think about New South Wales, just think about region, Australia. You can obviously go global from there, but I think again, there's no reason why you can't speak to people. There's no reason why you can't jump on a Zoom call or a Teams call, whichever flavor of the month is at the moment. But I think it's really important.
I think something that Craig just touched on, that collaboration is really important about if you've got someone who might be working in that space. I think it's a good one for Ash to maybe expand on about how your business venture kind of evolved and how it kind of originated by working in a co-working space where we are today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the lead, Sam, because I was just sitting here thinking, I'm experienced all of that, and I'm very interested in your take on the city versus country regions as well, because one of the things that drives me to distractions is when certain politicians go up and talk about inner city latte sippers. Well, I drove to Broken Hill a little while ago, and at every little town atop the way you could stop and get a great latte. You know what? Country people have good coffee too. And it's like there's this idea that suddenly this is the real Australia, the slightly dopey straw between your teeth. Like, it is so gone. It is so gone from our regions, that idea. And I just wish politicians would stop kind of putting that divide in place. I've got clients in Broken Hill and Leichhardt. We can do that. We can walk and chew gum here. But look, in terms of my...
our missing teeth. I heard that yesterday on another panel. Sorry, Joe.
But in terms of my journey here, look, I'm a naked advocate of these sorts of spaces. In that, when I came here sort of 2 years ago, I had an idea, and my business plan now looks very different to what it did. And I often describe this as a space where people have just the right level of interest in your business, and like, I know there's that caginess, like, this is my idea. Well, guess what? Most of the world is pretty self-absorbed. People are interested in their own thing. They're probably not just setting landmines to spill over your idea and take it and run it to Singapore. It may happen, but it's really niche. It's on those crap, commercial TV programs. Actually, the rest of the time, we're all just doing the best we can with what we've got. And so consequently, the thing that I would have missed, or did miss, beavering away at home, was the very humanness of interacting with other people. And this is a great place where you have all the benefits of working in an office without the office politics, you know. And so the conversations you have at lunchtime or during the meetings, like everyone's genuinely interested in you succeeding. That's the general vibe, and that is so important. Not to mention, as you said, Sam, you know, I met another startup through came to this space, and the two of us now are working in a business partnership together with something very different but much better. There's now 5 of us involved in the concept, the business, and the idea. There's no way that would have happened without this space.
Yeah.
Now, there's not a parallel universe with another Ash that just sat in his office and beavered away, so I don't know what that would have resulted in.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's certainly, you know, I speak very highly of this place and that collaborative environment. It's just, it's been pivotal, really.
In that regional context too, I think there's an assumption that, you know, innovation happens in the city and then we catch up. I think there's a real shift that's happening now. COVID has accelerated it, where people are going, I'm going to locate myself in the region. A, it's cheaper to set up your operation. The idea that you have to be close to your customers, well, COVID's allowing you to do that. Well, flexible working, remote working, you can still stay close to your customers if they happen to be urban customers. But there are so many more customer bases in the regions, in the sense that if you wanted to do agriculture is an obvious one, and one of the whole points of it is to be in the region, you're close to your customers, it gives you credibility. But even or in health or something like that. But even if you're a startup and you're hacking it out in a big metropolitan Melbourne or Sydney, and you might have a project that focuses, or your product focuses on aging populations. Why don't you move to Foster? You'll be surrounded by them. Like, it's seriously, there's an idea that you can, there's now this flexibility, and you may only do it for a year to test your market. But the point about you're saying is people, when you're in a smaller space, you do have more opportunity for more direct engagement with your customers. Even though you might have less customers to engage with, the quality of the engagement can be improved. And that, as a startup, is really what you want to do. You want to build your core customers, you want to build strong confidence with them, and then you can take that product anywhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is easier in practical terms. It might be easier for your product to do that in a region, to lead in the innovation space. At a bigger picture at government level, we do have government doing other investments which are kind of trying to drive the diversity and professionalism in regional towns. And the classic thing that's happening at the moment is the special activation precincts that the New South Wales government's putting together in existing regional cities that will drive technology. So the parks activation precincts will be a big transport precinct, lots of different opportunities there for tech-enabled freight monitoring. So the idea is that through those catalysing opportunities, we might find that the world-class innovation kicks off in the country and then the city catches up.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Transport has something, I know a few startups who are working in supply chain, and I said, you know, are you aware of this? And again, there's that disconnect between the city and the country, right, where a lot of people don't know what's going on. They're like, what's that? And I'm like, well, here's the link. And they get kind of amazed. They go, how do we get into that? And I'm like, well, go out to the park and have a look, right?
The Parks Activation Precinct, just for the people that are listening, is basically a major road rail freight intersection for all agricultural freight, but it's a freight line between Melbourne and Brisbane as well. And major intermodal activities going to happen there, and adjunct commodities there, businesses there around it.
And that's where I think, like organisations like RDA and other that, you know, there's an opportunity to communicate and connect all that together. And but I agree. If you're a startup and you want an honest opinion, then I think you're going to get a lot more out here than what you might get in Sydney. That's my humble opinion. So.
I think we're living through a really interesting time, aren't we? I mean, not to state the obvious with COVID and all of that, but you know, I think there's a hunger and a celebration of innovation. And, you know, the Americans, for all their faults, you know, they have a real culture of innovation and business-minded. Like, they're always thinking where the opportunities. And I love hearing the fact that the health district has granted permission for people to innovate and progress their ideas. I love the fact that the RDA is all over this, you know, like, and we, you know, there's probably, you know, maybe there have been better times, but now is a really good time if you've got an idea. The government's on board, there's capital sitting out in the wings, you know, there's like, everything's come together, and you know what, we've got this opportunity to actually create a better world through us all innovating in the direction we want, which is why I talk about, that values-based, position we start from. Because God knows we can't rely on our governments to do that piece. The government has clearly said, business, you solve our problems, fiscally and on multiple levels. And now we've actually got an alignment, I think, where businesses are being fostered and people are being, it's being celebrated. So
Yeah, I agree.
In fact, we might be moving the discussion onto some potential barriers for any kind of startups, but just to maybe kickstart some of that conversation, I would say one of those barriers that we're all talking about is promoting what is happening in our region. We all know about it, and I'm doing lots of learning from some of the conversations, but there's fantastic initiatives and funding and huge grants in the health space, and we see it in health as the ultimate recruitment tool. You often hear it's really hard to get doctors and nurses and allied health out to rural and remote regions, but I do believe the innovation, research and other kind of things that the generation that might want to relocate their family out from Sydney and metro areas so that they get a lifestyle that's great for family, they get their work, but then they have all the other sides around, continuing their research, continuing their career progression, being involved in education and training in the health world. So it's a great recruitment and retention tool, but yeah, we have a big problem trying to sell what we're doing and tell the world some of the great stuff that's happening in our region to try and bring people out here.
Yeah, well, must have had PSP because that was where we were going. I don't know how you found out about that. I might just highlight one point that Carolyn made, which I think we kind of talked around about, is just the burn rate. That if you're in a regional centre, obviously your cost of living is a lot less and you can do what you want to do for a lot longer. But on that note, we will move over to my next question, which is what you see as the main issues facing innovation in business in the regional centres. I might kick off again with Ash, only because you mentioned you've been doing it for 2 years, and I know some of the experiences you've had during that time. If you want to...
I think a lot of our barriers, it's to some sense are self-imposed, and it's the disease of the 21st century is busyness. And like how many times, we all do it. We go, oh, how's things going? Oh, just really busy. It's like, and like, let's unpack that. You're stressed, incompetent. What lies under busy? And I think, or poor time management, whatever. I think that probably the biggest challenge I face now is actually creating enough time and space to actually fully develop and think through and strategize. It's that old thing about working on the business, not in it. Like everyone I speak to is flat out, and it appears like if you don't create that space, it won't magically appear. One of the things I've also noticed is when I had to work for an organisation, if I didn't use my 4 weeks annual leave, it would go to 8 weeks, and then someone would tap me on the shoulder and go, hey, you better take a break. All right, I better take a break. And you don't get that. Like, unless you actually cause yourself to stop, or as a mentor of mine once said, spend some time with your off switch on, you come unstuck. So to me, one of the main barriers is just that busyness. And I know like a lot of organisations are financially stressed. I mean, our hearts go out to a lot of people who are suffering now in COVID. Well, that's a hard position to innovate from unless necessity is the mother of invention and your back's to the wall. And sometimes you do get great ideas that way out of desperation, but it's not pleasant. You know what I mean? So actually, that's why I said at the beginning, that tip is like, get yourself in a position that you can even think about this stuff and execute it is probably, the barrier to overcome. And a lot of that is in busyness, financial pressure and family issues, all of that.
Good insight. I might throw to Craig to answer now, only because being new to the region, you've thrown yourself into the entrepreneur world out here, and it's been fantastic. Seeing from the outside in, what have you noticed?
So probably it's probably a bugbear for me, which is around, and this is...
Don't make it tech.
Oh, wait. No, I definitely won't make it tech. We should talk about technology, but anyway. But it is around education, right? So it is around actually... it is a frustration when you talk to a business owner. It's like, don't talk to me about technology. I don't know about it. It's like, well, hang on, that's a key part of your business. And at the end of the day, you're the CEO. and the buck stops with you. If you get hacked, or if a competitor comes in and takes your business, that's actually on you. That's not on anybody else. And if you don't embrace technology, then well, who's going to? Someone will. So for me, around innovation, a lot of it's to do with education, and it's education from right through from kids who are in school out here, through to governments and corporates and everything in between. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I kind of see as a barrier to innovation is getting, and this is probably a little bit more focused on business owners, and this is probably where startups get a bit frustrated as well out in regional areas, is the embrace of technology, right? So there are some technical barriers there, and again, we can talk about internet and all that sort of stuff, but they're not really there, right? So if you really want to take that away, you can take it away. But yeah, they're the other one. My other one, which is something I noticed when I arrived here early, is that there is good innovation going here, but it's extremely siloed, right? So very few folks know what's going on, the next door, next town, next region, next city. And I've really found that since I've moved out here, and it's been before COVID, when we could have a bit of a run around. I was doing a bit of networking here in late December and early January. I was really amazed at some of the really cool stuff that was going on, but I was also just as amazed that they didn't know that the gate existed, or that upstairs was a thing, or that RDA was here. And I kind of think, well, hang on. And so coming from the city, where you would think, oh, you must all be competing against other, it's actually the opposite. It's hyper-connected, right? So all these, it's everything from meetup groups. Okay, we've got the tyranny of distance in regional areas, but that shouldn't stop knowing about what's going on. And as I said, and I'll pick on upstairs as a good example. I don't think a lot of startups in the region actually know upstairs is here, right? And it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in Bathurst to get the advantages that upstairs offer, or a community space like upstairs offers you. So I think that you don't, and again, they think they have to go to the city for that. Oh, we've got to go to the startup hub. Well, sometimes, most of the time, you can actually do it from here. You're a good example, James. You know the value of this space, right? So they're the kind of things that I kind of see my two big ones. The education is the one I think people do need to start embracing technology. You can't kind of put your head in the sand anymore and go, oh, I don't want to talk about that. It's not my problem. You need to make it your problem, and you need to kind of learn it. We all know how to drive cars. We all need to know how to drive our computers or tech. So that's my big.
Love it. Carolyn?
I think the barrier probably in the region is that there's an assumption that innovation is only about tech. And innovation comes in lots of different shapes and forms. And it can actually just be about, we're doing innovation within government. So we're teaching and you're encouraging similarly professional academics and practitioners to think about their way they work in an entrepreneurial or a startup way. And that takes into account understanding who their client or their customer is, maybe using things like human-centered design and different ways of practice and different ways of thinking of designing a service, not just a product, but a government service. So when we talk about innovation in the regions, I think the barrier is that people think it is a tech conversation, and it is in some cases within the businesses, but it's actually about how do we do that. And even in the Department of Agriculture, we're really at the beginning of a journey where we're mining our own data. That's innovation. To mine that data better, to get real-time responses to deal with everything from bushfire emergencies. We've got a back catalogue of fantastic data that can help us do forecasting. How do we harvest that out of a massive organisation efficiently? That's a bit of a data question, but there's also a bit of a policy question. It's a bit of the same question we have in health about we've got this vast reservoir data banks that are able to be triggered for great innovative purposes and future purposes. How do we help ourselves? How do we help our people understand in a government sense? And perhaps this does work at a micro level, that you might even have a startup business or a traditional business that doesn't realise they're sitting on two products, their actual product and the data about their actual product.
Correct.
So it's that kind of level of sophisticated thinking, and that's what innovation, the broader definition to me means, and that's the meaning I'm trying to encourage through my organisation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, because immediately a lot of people do go to technology, and you're 100% right. It's not always about faster CPU or
No.
that kind of stuff, or internet. So
It's why you do it using the tech, not the tech as an
Exactly.
end in itself.
And one thing I will elaborate on.
But I'm not
Yeah,
like the tech's
no,
incredibly
yeah.
important.
But one of the things people who know me now, I know speak about this quite often, is if you can't business justify a technology solution I'm putting in front of you, if you can't business justify it to me, don't do it.
Mm.
I'm a big believer in that, right? So even though I work in a really high tech space and I absolutely love technology, and I am a geek, but also if there's not a business outcome to it, listening to some of the pictured things, that could be a technology problem, maybe they're not, because business justification's not there. So that's true.
And I think one of the things that's been touched on so far today is that access to information. So there's an array of support that's out there for startups and innovation in regional settings, but it's just knowing where to look.
Mm-hmm.
Because as Craig touched on, it's being in that silo mentality that I'm out here in the ether, plugging away, and it might be my business pivoting to a new product or how I sell. And so just touching on what Caroline said, I think buy from the bush is an example of innovation. It's not necessarily simple idea, but it changed
speaks to the heart.
Exactly, but it changed how businesses considered distributing and selling their product. And I was out at Condo a while ago, and the hall is a dress shop and a cafe out at Condobolin. So any people tuning in today, next time you go through Condo, check it out. But one of the ladies that worked there said she had an earrings business, and through Buy From the Bush, it's just gone gangbusters, and it just builds that confidence. And I think that was one of the first things that was touched on. It's about unearthing and kind of building confidence in the sector. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be technology.
That was a tech thing.
But it was. It's about changing, pivoting. It's pivoting and changing and adapting. And I think, but also just knowing that there's information resources like upstairs here, or tech meetup groups that exist in the region, or business connect advisors who are embedded in places like upstairs, because they will help you navigate that government journey that you need to go on to help your business evolve. Because if you're not in that space, you might be the innovator, you might be the ideas person, but navigating government processes to get set up or getting ABN or whatever it might be, might just throw your hands up.
You have one of the best portals for accessing data that I've ever seen. If you're a startup, like some of the data that RDA, Central West particular, puts out to market is fantastic. So if you really wanted to know your audience, like that database is like a gold mine. So.
And to add one more comment to that, which we see a lot here at Upstairs, is something just as simple as asking someone. By having a conversation doesn't hurt anybody. And it's amazing how much confidence you can get just by talking to someone in the know to take that next step. And, the steps aren't lunges, that you can crawl before you run.
Just to pick up on some of these conversations, 12 months ago, just before we started or a bit over 12 months ago for our first pitched event, Carolyn, who I'd known, put me in touch with Jared here at Upstairs, and then that got us going for the first pitch. And then we sort of went, right, we need to pivot, we need to kind of think about a green sustainability category. And again, I came back to these guys, and they've got me in touch with Craig to help us run some of the technology, and then some environmental impact project ideas with Ashley. So, and of course, and Sam's helped out in terms of giving us some contacts for fundraising for it. So it is a real community effort, and you just have to ask the questions. And Upstairs and a lot of the organisations that you're seeing here today really will put you in the right direction. If not provide the service themselves, they'll tell you who else in the region can do it. So it's great team effort.
And that is what we call a crescendo.
Yes.
I don't know if you had another comment about the issues that.
I'll just pick up on the obvious elephant in the room that I don't think's been touched on yet, and that's about the dollars to do it. Speaking with the health hat on, we will be entering quite a big period of austerity post-COVID, which will look at trying to trim fat in our service delivery in the next years to try and recoup the big costs to the health system. But we don't want things like our innovation to stop in that time. So we're going to need to really think differently about how we keep fundraising and linking up with really great industry partners and organisations in our region and beyond to develop pretty slick philanthropic sponsorship processes. So that's a bit of a call out if anyone's interested. But the city do great things in this space with with great like the Royal Kids Foundation and things like that. So we need to look to them to see how we can engage it with our big partners out here to try and keep putting dollars into building innovation. So I think money is a really important thing, and certainly trying to get access to money for startups. I don't know if anyone else has any comments around that. But before I move on the flip side, when we are doing our startups in health and in the research sense, another big barrier, but something we absolutely need in any kind of project plan, evaluation, research or design is about health economics or economics of the decision making. So as Carolyn was mentioning, we've got massive data, but how can we do innovation? We need to prove it works with the dollars. So we need to say this intervention or this program led to these savings. Usually it's not about making money in health and government. It's about having efficiencies, saving efficiencies, and then reinvesting that money in. So health economics is a big kind of barrier. We really should get access to more of that, and trying to prove that you're making big savings with your innovations is a really big area for us to work towards.
I would say in the ag space, this was a particular issue we recognised, the Department of Primary Industry recognised when a lot of ag tech startups were emerging 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the things that we've done is we've co-hosted a venture capital firm called Spark Labs Cultivate that co-hosts with us in our premises in Orange. And the point of that being is to be able to give, the government itself, we don't provide equity to startups in a direct fashion, and very few programs that a government make will do that. They'll give you perhaps a grant or a training grant or a program grant, or like Upstairs is run. But the point about being able to access that capital for the next step is genuinely it is tricky. But what we did was we worked with Spark Labs Cultivate, and they really wanted to have a footprint because their focus is on ag tech investment. They wanted to be outside of the capital cities. They wanted that credibility, and it's been a really nourishing relationship because they're there for our startups that go through our program and other startups in the region that are doing ag tech. There's somebody literally down the road that they can go and talk to that may finance them, and if it's not suitable for them, the community's big enough for them to say, but there is another person over here. It might be Blackbird, it might be whatever. And that funding is growing. The biggest thing that entrepreneurs need to understand and learn, whether it's through a program or engaging, is how to pitch appropriately to that investor, what rings their bells. And it's a very different pitch from, say, a government pitch. Like in Alice's circumstances, when you're pitching back to government about an idea and you're an internal public servant, and I think it's important to keep mentoring, you can be a startup entrepreneur and be a public servant at the same time. That's never happened before.
Yeah,
that's a really nice thing we try and tell young people who are considering.
The world will stop.
Not quite. I mean, you don't have the freedom, you don't end up collecting the personal profits necessarily from the innovation you might bring into your business or into the department, but it's a very exciting thing to have that level of freedom to try things.
Yeah.
But again, the pitch when you're pitching back to government, it's about government savings, it's about business efficiency. When you're pitching to a venture capitalist, they have a particular set of needs, and that's something that you as a startup you think you might know, but it's really good to get some training on that, and then try and find money. So, but I think hopefully with COVID, people with venture capital will realise that they don't have to necessarily be in the capital cities to be providing venture capital to people. I'm hoping that it will evolve that way.
Yeah, me too. I agree. And I'll have to quick little think.
So I just have to jump in here because we've only got 60 seconds left. We've got one question from the audience. How do we get the regions to invest in regional innovation as a long-term approach rather than a short-term government service that stops when funding dries up? Hands up.
Philanthropy.
I'd like to see that. I mean, there is lots of money that runs around this economy. We spend $1 billion a year on energy at the moment. We buy all of that from out of this space. What if we turn that around? For the first time in many years, technologically, we can generate that energy for all parts of our economy here. We can keep $1 billion in the Central West region just by that technological change, which will become socioeconomic. We need to be smart enough to direct it, create the need, and have a compelling case for that to occur.
I think that's probably the spark of a much larger conversation as well. Unfortunately, we're going to run out of time. before, but thank you everybody today for coming along. That was a great discussion, and thanks to SparkFest for having us. We've got 10 seconds to go, so
Quick ad,
Yeah.
if you're interested in AgTech innovation, on the 28th there will be the GATE virtual event on the 28th of October. Hopefully we can put a link through about that. So you'll hear all the latest from our cohort of ag entrepreneurs. 28th of October,
Brilliant.
Wednesday,
thank you.
live streaming.
Thanks, guys.
Hello. Thank you.